William Hill, the home of betting.
Now, in the wake of a thrilling Irish Champions weekend, I've got our Ireland correspondent David Jennings on the line to ask him 5 big questions that emerged from 2 days of action at Leopardstown and the Curragh. So, Dave, let's begin first with Australia. Has he lost his air of invincibility, do you think?
I think he has. I think it was a case of going to Champions Weekend and everybody thought Australia was the champion on Champions Weekend, and it was really disappointing to see him beaten. Really, obviously it wasn't Joseph's finest hour, as everybody knows, but still, you know, you'd imagine, even though everything seemed to go wrong, you still imagine he might be good enough to win the race. I think he would have been retired if he had won the race, so it's a case now he has to go back to the well again. I think he'll show up on India in the British Champions Stakes, the Champions Day at Ascot, and he's going to have to prove himself. He might be running against Free Eagle, he might be running against the Grey Gatsby again, but he has to prove himself now, whereas I think before the Irish Champions Stakes he had almost proven himself. So I think it is a step backwards, and I think he has lost his air of invincibility.
The Grey Gatsby and Ryan Moore on the near side, neck and neck, 50 yards to go. Australia, the Grey Gatsby has got him on the line. Ryan Moore wins the Quipco Champions Stakes.
Disappointment there for the O'Brien team with Australia, but it's fair to suggest they still have a firm grip on next year's classics, don't you think?
They certainly do, as always seems to be the case in the last decade or so anyway. The Ballydoyle have a really strong team of juveniles this year, and Gleneagles just keeps on winning. You know, he does his thing, he goes out there, he seems so straightforward, and he has that turn of foot that just, you know, seems to just kick in when he needs it, and he's very impressive really, and look, he looks a genuine 2000 Guineas contender. Then you've got John F. Kennedy, who looks a real derby horse. I know a lot of people were underwhelmed by his performance on Saturday in the race, obviously, that Australia won last year. I wasn't underwhelmed at all. I think he just is the type of horse that just does enough. I thought he kicked 4 or 5 lengths clear of Furlong out, then was just idling a little bit on front, and you know, he beat some pretty useful horses in that race, and I thought he won it fairly convincingly. I think John F. Kennedy is very, very good, as his name suggests. I think we all expected him to be good once he was christened, so I would say at this moment in time John F. Kennedy will be my early idea as next year's Derby winner.
Now we saw Free Eagle storming to success. Can he make his mark in bigger races?
I think of all the performances this weekend, it was the one that blew everybody away. That was very interesting to hear Dermot Weld interviewed after the race, and he was asked about him, and he said, you know, we've had a great year. He said it's like a manager missing his star player all year and getting his star striker back for the big day, and he hopes to have him for the rest of the season. You know, it was only a Group 3, but you know, it was really, really impressive, and you know, he put real daylight between himself and the field. He's a real player in the Champions Stakes at Ascot, a real player, and he's going to be fresher than the rest of them as well, because you know, he's had, obviously he came from a year off, you know, we hadn't seen him for so long, and you'd imagine obviously there's a chance of the bounce factor, but Dermot Wells certainly knows what he's at. I think he had plenty of work done before he ran at Leopardstown. He's as good a horse as Dermot has had in a very, very long time, and he's going to know where he stands with him, so I wouldn't be surprised at this moment in time if I was to have a bet in the Champions Stakes at Ascot. I'd be back to Free Eagle.
But it's a one-horse race for the KPMG Enterprise Stakes. Free Eagle by 8 lengths.
Now we saw Brown Panther scampering away with the Irish St Ledger. Will he confirm that form with those behind him at Ascot?
I'd be a little bit sceptical of the race of the Irish St Ledger. It was one of them races where, you know, you're watching it and you're kind of wondering, did they kind of let the pacemaker go, and they kind of let Brown Panther go as well and disregarded him a little bit. You know, it was a very clever ride obviously from Richard Kingscote, but it was almost as if there was 2 races going on. Eye of the Storm was obviously setting the pace, and then I just wondered, did they just maybe not give enough respect to Brown Panther? Now he was the best horse in the day by a long, long way, and you could argue that Eye of the Storm was tailed off, so you know, that adds a bit of substance to the performance. But you know, he's been a fantastic servant to the Tom Bascombe yard, and you know, he seemed to bounce off the ground. He was very, very impressive, and you know, he's coming alive now as a real top class player. Leading Light, you'd imagine that isn't as good as Leading Light is. You'd imagine he's a little bit better than that, but again, like Australia, he might have to come back on Champions Day at Ascot and prove himself again. Before this weekend you had Australia, you had Leading Light, you know, they were absolutely at the top of their game, almost invincible, but the 2 of them now have been beaten, so both of them are going to have to prove themselves again this season.
After winning 8 of the 16 races, do you expect more British-based trainers to target the Irish Champions weekend in future?
I think that's probably one of the main things that's come out of Champions Weekend is the British Challenge and how successful that was. You know, from not a huge amount of runners. Like I suppose it's not really like Cheltenham in that, you know, some firms bet on Cheltenham whether Ireland will have more winners than Britain. But in this case, you know, I think everybody expected Ireland to rule the roost. You know, you expected Australia to win the Champions. to win the Irish Champion Stakes. You expect Leading Light to win the Ledger, but then it kind of all went a bit pear-shaped. And I think the response that it's got, reading Twitter, reading all the social networks, British trainers seem to have really enjoyed the weekend, and you know, they've given it the thumbs up. And I think you'll see more and more challenges from Britain coming over the next few years. You know, it's a new initiative. It's going to take time to kind of mould, and I just think this is the perfect start. You know, British trained horses winning so many races. You know, it's going to make all the other trainers, you know, the likes of the Richard Hannons, the likes of the Michael South, step up and take notice. And I wouldn't be one bit surprised if you've seen a real stronger British challenge next year.
As they race up towards the finish, Cursory Glens will win the Moyclair. Another Group 1 for Roger Varian.
We liked her a lot. You know, she's. I think she's a classy filly.